thought everybody would like a better look at the tapestry that I have begun working on. This is, in case you haven't seen Monday's Floss Tube episode, this is a series of tapestries that I am finishing for a stitcher who passed away. Now, I purchased these through Thread and Eye many years ago, and they were brought into the store by the husband who of the lady who was working on them, who knew that he didn't know how to dispose of them. He knew that they were special, and so he knew that they would find their way to the most appropriate person through Kathy and Neil, and that's how I've ended up with them. And they are amazing tapestries, and I have looked at the kits online. I know their value, I know their worth, and I am just very grateful that I had the opportunity to purchase these when I did. So I thought I would show you a little bit more about the wool that I'm working with. So this is Appleton wool, and the stitcher, and I really wish I knew her name, because just to call her the stitcher seems so impersonal, but I don't know who she was. I know very little about her other than she was very organized and very neat, because everything was, very extremely well organized and tidy in the box. All of the wool, she attached extra labels on them. You can tell she cut them, from scrap pieces of paper that she had around the house, and she has labeled them with their number, so they're very easily identifiable for me. On the tapestry itself, she placed a piece of wool that matches the correct number, so that, if you just want to do a quick double check, it's very easy to see which one you're dealing with. And of course, I've just pulled that one out, so I'll have to reattach that one after I'm done here. Okay, so the place where I'm working, I put a few stitches in at the beginning of the week. I started here with this green background, and I've stitched all the way up here. And then the instructions suggest that you start from the middle of a motif and work your way out. And it says that the background should be the last thing that you stitch. And I was just so excited to start. And it was the one color that I knew without a doubt that I had the right one. So I was just so anxious to put a few stitches in, and it was really late at night. So that's why I just went ahead and I did a few background stitches. And it does look that the lady before me also had similar thoughts and feelings, because a lot of the time the background has been completed and the inner motif has been left blank. So what I'm doing is I'm trying now, moving up, to sort of start from the middle and work my way out. Identifying the colors from the painted canvas to the numbers on the side is tricky. And I'll admit that the first night, and also it didn't help that it was late at night and I'd had a very long day and I was a little tired, but I was so excited. I probably should have waited until the next day, because I did find it a little frustrating. Also, it was at night and the lighting was not as good, as daylight, when you can check that your colors are correct. So I'll admit that at first I thought, what have I gotten myself into? Because this is quite tricky. And then the more I looked at it and thought, okay, we'll just, it also, one other thing, some of the numbers that I'm dealing with are rolled up in my frame. And so in order to see all of them, I have to unroll and check that the color that I'm looking for isn't hidden underneath the scroll rod. So once I determined that, okay, just be brave and go for it and assume that you've got the number right, then, sort of taking that first step into putting those first stitches in the center of the leaf was, felt pretty good. Once you got started, I thought, okay, you can do this. So there are actually two colors that I've done in here. And it can be a little tricky to see at night. Again, it's a little better to do in daylight when you're dealing with really subtle color variations, because I don't know how well you can see, but in this leaf right here, there are two colors. There's an outer color here, and then there's a very slight darker color on the inside. And it is very clear where the stitch should be taken. These canvases are beautifully painted. It's very clear which color should go where. You just have to watch that, because the color difference is subtle, that you've chosen the right one. But you know, a stitch here or there that's off, no one's going to notice when it's hanging on the wall and they're looking at the thing as a whole. And in fact, it's quite funny because these canvases are so beautifully painted. When I held it up to show John, he said, well, it's finished, isn't it? And it isn't until you look closely that you can see that it is a canvas and not, in fact, a painting. So I thought that was quite funny. Anyways, so the three colors that I'm working with today are the two different colors on this leaf here. And those are given as 401 and 541. So that's these two here. And then the background color is 647. And I know that these kits are still available for purchase because I've had many messages from people saying, do you know how lucky you are? And, you know, make sure you go and look at the kits online and see how valuable they are. And absolutely, I am well aware of the value of these treasures, and that's why I fully intend to finish them, because they're incredible. So 647, 401, and 541. These are the three colors that I thought I would attempt to work on today. We'll see how long this video goes. Maybe I'll only even get one color. I'm not sure. So I'm going to start with the darker part of the green before I do the lighter. So that means I am 401. 401 is up. So the way that the wool works, it's given to you in, and you know what, I haven't opened the other two yet, so it's possible that these were done in a hank and the stitcher before me maybe cut them in half. I'm not sure. The other ones are still pristine in their packages, and so I thought it best to leave them in the packages until I was ready to start the next one, because that way they're kept as clean and dust-free as possible. So I'm going to assume that this was sold as a hank, and she has attached the tag in the middle, just like you would with a watercolors watercolors cotton, and in half. And then also I find these little things that I'm finding out about this work that are really endearing. You know, she was so careful. She saved every, you know, it looks like she maybe did a little bit of stitching and then switched to a different color, but if she wasn't done with the strand of wool, she tied it around the correct color. So you can see here she wasn't done with this bit of wool. So I'm untying the strand that she last used here, and this is how much wool she had left. So it looks like she was very much like me and frugal with economizing our thread, because this certainly isn't a very long length, but like me, I like to use things up to the last little bit. So we're going to go with that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to quickly discuss, because I had a very, very good question from Susan, Golden Stitcher, on Instagram. I think most of us know Susan quite well. She's a fantastic stitcher and a very good friend. And Susan asked whether or not I was going to be using a laying tool. And the answer to that is no. I'm not going to be using a laying tool, because I don't think it's necessary for me, and I don't think it's necessary for this project. Now, I should clarify this as a caveat. This is my opinion, and it's quite possible that my opinion, you know, properly trained tapestry needlepoint artists would probably disagree with me. And I don't know that because I am not properly trained. And so if you are and you happen to be watching this Stitch With Me video, which is highly unlikely, you know, leave some comments for us so that we can know your thoughts and your feelings. My thoughts and feelings on this are that the stitcher before me did not use one. And it's not that it's untidy, it's that I can tell not everything is 100% uniform. Okay, and even using a laying tool, it's not going to look like a machine did it. But I think that's part of the charm. I think that's part of the charm, that it looks like, you know, it's been hand stitched. And the stitches are nice and small and nice and tight with 3 strands of wool that I think that they're going to lay nicely enough. Now you can see this section of, and I have a laying tool here to show you. So this is my laying tool. This is what it looks like. And once I've got my needle loaded, I'll show you actually how you use it in case you're interested. And I'm very slow with using one and I'm not very good at it, but I'll show you how I do it anyways. So this is a laying tool. It has a pointy end at the tip so that you can be very precise with how you're using it. And so here's where I started. It was right about here. And I went all the way up to here. Now 3 of these rows that are in here, so only 3 of them, I used the laying tool. And the rest of it, I didn't, because I wanted to see whether or not I could tell a difference. Now, because I know where I did it, I can see a difference. But the difference is so slight that I think that for me, it's not worth it. These are going to remain in my family. They're going to be on the wall, and one day they're going to be passed down to my kids. And so, you know, I'm not entering these in competitions or contests or, you know, hoping that they end up in a museum one day. I want these to be loved by my family. And I also want them done. I want them done and on my wall so that we can enjoy them. And using a laying tool slows me down because I'm a two-handed stitcher. I have to manipulate the laying tool and bring my other hand out. And so that really slows me down. And like I said, I really want these done. So my answer is to Susan, and actually Susan and I did discuss this already, and I discussed it with Heidi Cran, Stitching 1/2, because she's another stitcher who I think has done quite a bit of canvas. I know she's working on Nova at the moment, and I also have her in my list of people to message when I have a question because, well, she's a good friend. And she and I chatted about it a little bit as well, and she agreed that she probably wouldn't use a laying tool either. So I felt like my decision was validated. So Heidi, if you're listening, because of you, I've decided 100% not to use a laying tool. However, for those who are interested, if you're curious, you've never seen someone use one, I'll do a few stitches with one so that you can tell. Now, the reason for the laying tool, and I don't think I said this at the beginning, if you're using 1 strand of floss, it's not necessary. There's only 1 strand. But if you're using multiple strands, especially, you know, if I were using 3 strands of DMC, I would probably use a laying tool if I wanted it to look its best. And so what that does is you can see the 3 strands are laying sort of a bit crooked. And when you put the laying tool underneath and you pull it taut, as you pull the stitch into the fabric, it just evens those strands out so that they lay flat beside each other. And then the stitch looks nice and even and flat when you finally attach it to the fabric. That was a very bad way of saying that, wasn't it? And I've misplaced the needle I was using. So that's a bit of a problem. I have some others, but I'm curious as to what I did with that other needle. Well, I'm sure I'll find it at some point. So I have the original baggie. The woman who started these had some needles in a baggie that came along with the kit. So you know what? I'm using them because they're there and the needles are beautiful. Perfectly, they're almost like brand new. There's no rust. They're, you know, just like everything else that's been available from what I'm working on. It's in great shape. So I'll just take another one of these. And now, which number did I say I was doing it? 401, right? 401. And so I'm going to be working on the darker green. So we'll use up this last little bit. Thread that needle up. Now wool is for me easier to thread than cotton or silk because I don't have to lick it. I am a thread licker, and I have admitted that here before. And I know there are lots of others out there who are thread lickers, but not with wool, not necessary, because the eye of the needle is a little bit bigger. I believe these are, they feel like 20s. This is either a 20 or an 18. It's hard for me to know exactly, but feels like a 20. Okay, so what I do is I take the tip of the needle, put it underneath the 3 strands, squeeze it nice and tight between my thumbnail and my index finger, slide it off the end, and then I can just wiggle those strands into the eye. I hope you could see that. Maybe I think I was in the camera shot there. Wiggle them in and then pull them through, and we are threaded, ready to go. All right. So with this piece, I'm using a combination of sewing in the back and waist knots for starting a new thread, depending on where I'm going to be starting, because I'll show you the back. I think you can see this okay. I'll move it down a little bit here. So in the stitching that's already been done, lots of areas here, there's plenty of excess thread at the back there in order for me to attach the wool. But in some places, this is all I've got. The back of the 10th stitch. You know, those tend to be the larger areas where it's just one color, and all you've got is the back of the 10th stitch. And because the fabric is a smaller count and it's 3 strands of wool, this is a bit tight, and I don't want to misshape the canvas. And so in an area like this, I would probably start with a waist knot, and I might even end with a waist knot as well, and then carry my new stitches over top of the old thread in order to anchor it. But because where I'm starting is down in here, where there's lots of excess wool that's been, you know, sort of carried around and whatnot, I mean, you can see it, right? There's plenty of area there to anchor my thread. And I prefer, it's just a personal preference, I prefer to anchor my thread before I start over a waist knot. Even though I'm absolutely perfectly capable of doing a waist knot, it's just not my personal preference. So I'm going to start here with a little bargello tuck. Now I know that I use that term a lot, and lots of times I have new people watching who ask me what the heck is a bargello tuck. And so I'll just show you again. Happy to show it 100 times. What a bargello tuck is, it's a very simple way of anchoring your thread in the back. So you pull, I pull my thread in until it's tucked away underneath, you know, maybe 4 or 5 other stitches. Neat and tidy. There's just a little bit of a tip there because I know my threads aren't even. So if I pull any harder, this is going to come right out because the 2 other strands aren't quite even to the end. And then all you do is you take your needle and you take an extra little teeny grab of excess wool or thread at the back, going in the same direction as the initial stitch, and then when you pull it through, your thread is anchored. And oh my goodness, look what I did. I tugged too hard and I've torn my wool. All right, well, let that be a lesson to you. Probably because, do you see where it's this is where it's broken. And I suspect this is where the woman had her needle. She probably had her needle here, the whole time that she was using this floss, and that would have weakened these fibers up here, and that's where I've just completely torn it apart. So I am going to get rid of that. See? Problems, but that's good. Then you get to see how to fix these things. So I'm going to remove it. I'm not going to just clip it and carry on because I don't, there's already enough wool back there. We don't need more. So I'm just going to pull that out. I'm going to remove it. And sadly, I don't get to use up that little bit of wool, but that's okay. All right, so let's go back to our 401. So now I'm going to pull from the hank, and all I do is I'm going to take one from the end, just like with DMC, and I'm going to remove it, pull one strand at a time. So there's one, oops, sorry. There's one. I'm going to pull from the same end each time so that I know my wool is all going in the same direction that it should be. There's two, and there's three. All right, 3 strands, 401. Now let's put these back together. I take them out individually because you want them to lie, you don't want them to be twisted around each other when you begin. So I'm going to line my ends up of the 3, and I'm just going to run them down. So now that they're together, they're back together again. It's a lot easier than pulling out 3 strands from the whole hank, because then you'll likely end up with a huge knot of hank, and you don't want that. So let's rethread our needle. There we go. Okay, back to square one here. And also, I don't like to have too much of a tail on my end because I like to use up to the end. The longer of a tail you have on your needle, this bit of wool has extra stress, or thread has extra stress put on it because it's double the thickness as it goes through the hole. And so extra wear and tear happens on this bit of thread that's at the top. And because I like to use right up to the end, I want this thread to look as beautiful as this thread. And quite often what happens is this thread will start to look a lot more worn. And as you can see, when I tore through the other strand, it weakens it. So that's why I don't keep a very long tail at the end. All right, so let's try this again, shall we? Let's tuck this in, anchor it. Pull that through. Take my extra little. Now with wool, you want a little bit more of a generous snip of tuck of thread there. Tuck, it's a Bargello tuck, so let's call it a tuck. There we go. All right, I am securely anchored. I'm ready to go. Flip it back over. And now the sun has come out here, so I'm hoping that you guys can still see, because I can't see the camera anymore. It's too bright for me to see the picture. So I'm going to keep recording, and unless disaster strikes when I play back this recording, we should be able to keep going. So we'll see. All right, so I'm down at the bottom here, and it's hard to see exactly, but these few stitches that are down here, that's the lighter color that's up there and around the leaf. So just this little bit here. So my first stitch with this color is right here, and the rest of these ones down here are the lighter color. So here we go. makes quite a nice sound. All right, so there's one. And as you can tell, I do not keep my canvas very, very tight because it is on scroll rods and I don't like to stress the canvas over much. So I loosen it at the end of my stitching. Now, oh, you know what? I went over 2 strands there. I'm going to be honest with you. Normally when I've been working on this, I've been putting my face right up close to the, I'm going to have to, you guys, I am not doing well today. There. Okay, let's try this again. I'd gone over 2 holes there. Rethread my needle. Maybe by the end of this video, I will have taken 5 stitches. Not much of a stitch with me video, but hopefully you found everything that I had to chat about interesting today. Hopefully. All right, let's try this again. There's the correct hole there. Okay, make it neat and tidy. It's also a little bit more flexible because it's close to the edge as well. Actually, no, I guess the whole thing is a little bit flexible. You know, no, it's fine. Okay. Sometimes when the thread is, the wool is new, I will stitch one-handed for a little bit because the length is quite long, and sometimes it's just easier to do it with my right hand until it's a little bit shorter. I go back and forth. Sometimes I just can't quite make up my mind. It's all right. It's all good. It is very bright and sunny right where I'm stitching now, so I am really hopeful that you guys can see this okay. All right, so now I'm going to see, you know what? With that bright sun, it is hard for me to differentiate between the colors. I'm going to move this over for myself a little bit. So pardon me for a sec. Okay, so the leaf I'm stitching, now I can see, I'm still in the camera, so you can still see where I am. I'm just out of the bright sunshine, and now I can see where my colors are a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to take one more stitch as I plan to do the rest of it, and then I'm going to show you, oh my goodness. What the heck happened there? That is definitely a pro for using the laying tool. Far less chance of that happening where it gets tangled up like that. Okay, so maybe I will be using a laying tool. We'll see. All right, so got my laying tool. I use it in my left hand when I'm using one. And I put my thumb on it as I start to pull the thread through. Oh, you can't even see that, can you? I'm out of the screen. Here, there. And as you pull the thread through, you run it across the laying tool, and then as you get closer, I put the tip down, and then you slide the tip out as you lay the strand. As you can see, I have only ever used one for about 10 minutes in my whole life, so I'm not very good at it, but you know, it's the general idea of it. So get it to that point there, laying tool. If I'm using this incorrectly, leave me a comment, tell me. I am not adverse to constructive criticism at all. If you have a better way to use it, or if I'm using it wrong, please tell me. I have never had a lesson on using a laying tool, so that is actually something that I should probably do. Maybe one day when I make my way to Royal Court at Hampton Palace, the needlework school, I'll learn how to use a laying tool properly. That would be pretty fun, wouldn't it? All right, folks, I've got started here, and the sun really, unfortunately, is playing a bit of havoc for me today because the sun keeps moving as it is wont to do, and it is now directly overhead. I have a skylight that's right over my head, and that's where the sun is right now, and it is shining directly on my magnifier and my camera and my hands, and the clouds keep covering it and uncovering it. So I think, and also with all of my slight problems today, this probably is not the best project to use for a Stitch With Me video. I can't just, I need to concentrate on what I'm doing. But I can tell you this, I'm loving it. I am loving it so much. Oh, it is just the most fabulous project I can imagine. And I really hope that you enjoyed me sharing a little bit more about it with you today. So if you have any questions or comments or ways that I can improve my stitching, leave me a comment below. I would love to hear it and love to have a conversation about laying tools or any other such thing. Be kind. Realize that I've never taken a lesson. I don't really know what I'm doing. So I pretend I know what I'm doing, but you know, I'm always really hoping to learn how to do better. So there you go. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and that you get lots of stitching time and lots of time with friends and family. And that's about it. Oh, wait, one more thing. I was so excited to share this with you guys today. And then of course, it completely slipped my mind because I'm a bit frazzled over that this did not go as planned today. In my mind, I finished like all the way up to here in my Stitch With Me video. Obviously that didn't happen. I think I did 10 stitches. So life is funny like that, isn't it? But the thing I wanted to share with you today was something special that I found on Instagram. And it is I will edit in her information right on the screen here. And I'm also going to put, you know what? I'm assuming it's a her. That's a good question. I think it's a her. Could be him. I can't remember if there's a name on the account. Anyways, that's not the important part. I will link the Instagram account that I'm talking about both on the screen, and I will put it in the drop-down box. I'll make sure that I do that today on today's video. This stitcher is from London, England, and they are working on designing and stitching a map of the London Underground. And it is really cool. It is so cool to see this taking shape. So he or she is sharing pictures. I'm pretty sure it's a she, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to find out because I did ask permission before I talked about this today, because I asked permission to share a picture in my video here. So I am going to link to her account. I believe the account is Cross X Stitcher London, but I suspect I'm wrong about that. So I'm going to make sure that I put the correct Instagram name in the drop-down box, and I'm going to put it right on the screen here. Go and check out that account because she is sharing pictures of doing the design work on the Ada and showing, you know, choosing colors for the different lines of the underground and the different stations. It's really, really cool. And I just think that it's so, what a creative idea. What a great thing to do. And can you imagine hanging that on your wall when you're done? I think that is absolutely incredible. And, you know, having the wherewithal to design something like that yourself and stitch it yourself. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to share a picture of that right here. And I hope you enjoyed. Have a great week, guys. Happy stitching. Happy weekend. Let's get those whips, if not finished, put some major progress in them. Have a great weekend. Take care.